Hey there, Kipsters, looking at objectives 1B.5 through 6, adding and subtracting unlike fractions, and multiplying and dividing fractions. A lot of skills here on this assessment. We're going to start with adding and subtracting unlike fractions. In the last video we talked about how to add like fractions. So if we're talking about adding unlike fractions, we mean fractions that have different denominators. So for example, 3/4 and 1/2 are unlike fractions because they have different denominators. So I'm going to start an example. All of these I'm asking to either find the sum or the difference. I'm either adding or subtracting. In this first one I see 2/3 plus 3/8. I'll rewrite them so that you can see them a little more clearly as fractions. First thing you see is these are unlike fractions because they have different denominators. So this is something you saw in the last video. What we need to do is find the least common denominator of these two fractions. So that means I want to figure out what's the smallest multiple of 3 and 8. I could list them out or I could use the cake method. I'll do both just to kind of refresh my memory. If I list out 3, it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, keep going, 21, 24. Listing them out for 8 would be 8, 16, 24. That's one way for me to see that the least common denominator should be 24. I could also use the cake method. If I try to divide 3 and 8, there's no number I can divide them both by. So since I can't divide them by anything, I already have my L right here. 3 times 8, which would get me 24. So either way, I know that my least common denominator is 24, and so I want to rewrite both of these fractions with a denominator of 24. So I'm going to bring them over here, and I know I want 2/3 to have a denominator of 24, and I know I will have 3/8, and I want to rewrite it with a denominator of 24. So this was a skill we practiced in the last slide, or the last video. If I want to turn 2/3 into something over 24, I know that 3 times 8 is 24, so I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by 8, and this now would be 16/24. I know 8 times 3 would be 24, so I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by 3, and this would now become 9/24. So now that I've rewritten these fractions with a common denominator, I can try myself and rewrite this as this first one was now 16/24 plus the second one, which was 9/24. They are now like fractions, which means they're much easier to add, or it's possible to add them since they have the same denominator. The denominator is the same, that's 24. In my numerator, I add the denominators, 16 plus 9, that equals 25. That's an improper fraction, so I'm going to turn it into a mixed number. 25/24 is the same thing as 1 and 1/24. And so that would be my answer for this first one. You can see a lot of fraction skills here involved in a single problem. Okay, stop the video here. Go ahead and try this 5/6 plus 4/9. After you've tried it on your paper, press play to check your answer. Okay, it's time to check our answer. You just tried 5/6 plus 4/9. I'm not going to show all the work to do it, but your least common denominator between 6 and 9 should have been 18. That's the smallest number they have in common. If you wrote 5/16 with a denominator of 18 and 4/9 with a denominator of 18, you would have had 15/18 and 8/18. If you added those things together, I'm going to do that over here so you can see. 15/18 plus 8/18. They're now like fractions, so it's going to be out of 18. And 15 plus 8 is 23/18. Again, you have a improper fraction. So if you turn this into a mixed number, this would be the same thing as 1 and 5/18. There's a lot of fraction skills involved. If you got 1 and 5/18, good job. Give yourself a check on your paper. So that's the first skill, is adding and subtracting unlike fractions, fractions with different denominators. Now we're going to talk about how you would multiply fractions. And the reason I'm not saying like or unlike is the process is the same regardless of whether they have the same denominator or different denominators. So I'm going to find the product of 1 2/3 times 3/8. So I'll rewrite it. That's 1 2/3 times 3/8. Now at this point you probably remember that to multiply fractions you're going to multiply straight across. The only reason we can't do that here yet is because I have a mixed number. So the very first thing I need to do is figure out, how do I write this as an improper fraction before I multiply? If I rewrite this as an improper fraction, 3 times 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, this is really the same thing as 5/3 times 3/8. Now that I have two fractions, an improper fraction and a proper fraction, I can just multiply straight across. So if I multiply straight across, 5 times 3 is 15. 3 times 8 is 24. I have 15 24ths. I can simplify this fraction. I think you can divide the top and bottom by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 24 divided by 3 is 8. And you really have 5/8. Something that you might have been able to figure out is that could have avoided maybe doing this by just simplifying this when you multiply, that these were just 1 and 1. That's another trick a lot of students have seen. But in any case, your answer should have been 5/8. Okay, I'd like you to try now. Stop the video here and multiply 2 and 5/6 times 3/5. Once you've tried it yourself, go ahead and press play to check the answer. Okay, you've tried B, it's now time to check the answer. If you had 2 and 5/6, again, the very first thing you're going to want to do is rewrite it as a improper fraction. 2 times 6 is 12. 12 plus 5 is 17/6 times 3/5. If you multiply 17 times 3, we're multiplying straight across. 17 times 3 is, I think, 51. My brain's not that big, so I'm going to just double check here. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5. Yep, 51. Over 6 times 5, that equals 30. So if you got that, you definitely did the first step correctly and you multiplied correctly. You may or may not have seen that you can also continue to simplify this fraction. I know that I can divide 51 divided by 3 and 30 divided by 3. And one hint is you saw that 17 times 3 to get 51. You know you're going to be able to divide both these numbers by 3. 51 divided by 3 is 17. I know because that's just the inverse of what I just did to get there. And 30 divided by 3 is 10. If you completely simplified this fraction, that's the answer you should have gotten. Give yourself a check if you got it. Last set of skills is going to be dividing fractions. And again, I'm not going to say dividing like or unlike fractions, because the rules to find the quotient of two fractions, it doesn't matter if they have the same or different denominators. First example that I'm going to do is 5 1/2 divided by 5/8. So again, I have this improper fraction, or excuse me, a mixed number, and I'm going to want to turn it into an improper fraction. So 5 1/2 is the same thing as 5 times 2 is 10. 10 plus 1 is 11/2 divided by 5/8. Now that I have two fractions, I can divide as I know how to. If I'm going to divide fractions, A lot of you have seen this trick of keep, flip, change. That means we're basically going to keep the first fraction the same. We're going to flip the division to multiplication. And then we're going to change the fraction. If I do that, I have really 11 halves times, I change the division to multiplication, 8 fifths. So this is a computational trick that allows you to divide fractions. Now I just need to multiply using the exact same rules that I learned in slide 2. If I multiply straight across, 11 times 8 equals 88. 2 times 5 equals 10. I can simplify this by dividing by 2. And that's really 44, 10 divided by 2 over 5. That would definitely be simplified. I could also go one extra step and turn it into a mixed number. 5 goes into 44 8 times. 5 times 8 is 40, so it's 40 with a remainder, or 8 with a remainder of 4. And so that this is really the same thing as 8 and 4 fifths. So the big takeaway here, the big thing that's new, is how do you divide the fractions? And if you look back over here, all you have to do is basically turn into a multiplication problem by keeping the first fraction the same, changing or flipping the division to multiplication, and changing the second fraction to its multiplicative inverse. Instead of 5/8, you had 8/5. Now I want you to stop the video here, and try to find the quotient of 2 2/3 divided by 2/3. Press play after you've tried and are ready to check your answer. Okay, you've tried B, and now it's time to check your answer. If you have 2 2/3, the very first thing you're going to do is turn it to an improper fraction. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 2. Your first fraction really was 8/3 divided by 2/3. To multiply, you need to keep, change, flip, or keep, flip, change, whichever way you think about it. Probably should be keep, change, flip, right? And in any case, the first fraction stays the same. You have 8/3. The division becomes multiplication, and then the second fraction flips to its multiplicative inverse, 3/2. If you have this so far on your paper, you already turned it into a multiplication problem correctly. And then it's just a matter of multiplying like we did in slide 2. 8 times 3 is 24. 3 times 2 is 6. 24/6 really just simplifies. 6 goes into 24 4 times. And your completely simplified answer would have been 4. Okay, now it's your chance to try independently. Please try these 6 problems for your independent practice. As you're working on to rewrite them so that you can see them a little bit more clearly. After you finish these 6, if you've done them correctly, you're ready to retake objective assessment 1B.5 through 6. Go ahead and get started. Good luck.